momentarily. Please be seated. Starting now, the business of improving women's health, a conversation with Chelsea Clinton, Kara Egan, and Naomi Watts.
Oh, I feel like you guys can do better than that. See, this is beautiful. There's a lot of excitement over women's health. So we are so honored that Chelsea, Naomi, and Kara would join us today. Thank you, ladies, for joining us. I love this conversation at such a timely time right now. I mean, we're honored that all of you who have been so active in women's health and advocates for women's health are joining us on this stage today. Thank you. Thank you for joining us at Founders House. So I wanted to start off Chelsea, you've been a very long time advocate for women's health, and your mother has such a legacy. What specifically are you hoping personally will be your addition to this legacy?
Oh, goodness. Well, Bonnie, thank you. And thank you to Inc. For platforming this conversation. It's an important one everywhere, but particularly here in Texas. I am so happy to share the stage with two women that I like and admire and respect so much. You asked about my mom. I don't think I could be her daughter and not care about kind of women's health and well-being. And if I think about, what I hope to contribute, since that's kind of the question that you asked, certainly it's, championing and elevating women like the two to my left. It's also trying to help all of us understand how really everything and anything is a women's issue, right? Whether we're talking about the economy or national security or environmental health and well-being, like those are women's issues too, not just our reproductive organs, although we certainly deserve rights and agency over them. But really anything and everything is a women's issue. And that also investing in women isn't only kind of, as I've heard my mom say my entire life, not only kind of the right thing to do, but the smart thing to do, because we've been so historically underinvested in not only the rates of societal and social, but really economic return have a much greater chance of being outsized. And I know that these two women really understand that.
Absolutely. So I wanted to introduce you all. Kara Egan is the founder of Teal Health, and she is developing the first ever cervical cancer screening at home, which is amazing. So in other words, we're going to be replacing the pap smear soon that of going into a doctor's office.
Anyone going to miss the speculum? No one's going to miss the speculum. No, no.
Show this video. Is it on?
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. It's like next time I go to fundraise, I'll just show this video. I'll be like, look at all the demand, right? Like everyone wants it. But yeah, we're working to create the first FDA approved at-home cervical cancer screening, and it can replace the pap smear. So it's right now everyone colloquially calls it the pap smear, but it's a cervical cancer screening. The best way to do it is with primary HPV. So we take the exact same test that you're using at the doctor's office, but allow you to just do it from home. So make it much easier for everybody, and also just increase screening rates. 1 in 3 women are behind on their screening right now. That's unacceptable. Cervical cancer screening is 100% preventable with screening. So that's what we're up to. Thanks to Chelsea and others in this room.
And it's the 4th most deadliest cancer for women.
Mm-hmm. And prior to instituting a cancer screening, it was the #1 cancer causing death for women. So the screening is incredibly important. And when we talk about things that we can like really rally behind, you can actually eradicate cervical cancer as a public health concern and overall with screening and vaccinations. But really screening is the way to do it. And so when you think about a call to action, like we can eradicate a cancer from this planet with women, right? So let's do it and get out there and tell people about it and make sure that as soon as it's available, everyone, and tell people to screen even when it's not available, right? Screen. But once Teal's out, we'll hope to get in more people's hands.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And Naomi, this is not your first foray into women's health. You started with Onda Beauty, and then now you have developed, pivoted into Stripes, which is a women's menopause wellness and biotech brand. Talk to us a little bit about Stripes and the larger picture of shifting the narrative of women's health.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Can everyone hear me? It's my hearing that's the problem. Okay, so I'll try to make it short. No, you can hear, right? Yeah. At 36, I was trying to get pregnant and learned that I was close to menopause, quote unquote. And it was very shocking to me, the idea that I may not get to have a family and that I was going to go into menopause. I had all kinds of symptoms, but I didn't know what they were. I didn't know they were related. Anyway, long and the short of it, I was able to get naturally pregnant and had 2 healthy children. But straight afterwards, by the age of about 42, I went into hardcore symptoms. I looked for community. I looked for connectivity with, family people, and doctors talked about my symptoms, and it kept getting met with closed doors. And just sort of contributing to more and more fear and a feeling of isolation. And I didn't understand this. Like half the population was going to be going through menopause if they were lucky enough, and yet no one was talking about it. So bit by bit, I tried to piecemeal all of the things. And don't forget, this was at a time where the internet was not exactly active. I was very much at sea trying to piecemeal it all together. When it got to the point where my skin became intolerable and I was on camera all the time, I was having raging, itching, angry skin. I really had to deep dive search into what was going on, even though the dermatologist was saying, here's some ointment, it'll be fine. You know, a couple of days later, it'll come back. So that's when I started looking at ingredients, changing my skin routine. And then I realized, I'm also dry in other places. So I envisioned this brand, and it was right at the beginning of COVID. And, you know, when we were all stuck at home with our thoughts, and that's when I started like really ruminating on the whole thing. And I pitched the idea to a biotech company. Amyris was, it was my first call. And right away at the end of that call, they said, yeah, let's do it. And I wanted to serve a woman who would be feeling exactly how I felt. I had a problem to solve for myself, which chances are or were that it was going to be the same for many other women. That this feeling of, okay, you're done, you should be invisible now, and we can't really take care of you. Just suck it up and you know, grin and bear it. And I don't think women should have to suffer. And yet we've been trained to do so. And this was a point where I was like, nah, I don't want to suffer. I want to do something about this.
I mean, you know, Hollywood is notoriously ageist. How was that kind of a hurdle that you needed to get past in order to really allow this brand to grow and strive?
Yeah, I really oscillated back and forth. Is this a good idea or a terrible idea? And particularly because of my industry being ageist, and I got started quite late at 30. It was really when I was launching my career, even though I was trying to have a career for at least 10 years before that. I was told it would all be over at 40. So why would I then call myself out and say, hey, I've got some advanced aging going on here? So I hid with that idea. I kept it at bay. I mean, I talked about writing a book with a friend, which I've now done and ended up on the bestseller list. For a long time ago, because I was like, why isn't there a source, a resource of information, of stories, women's shared experiences? But of course, I didn't have the nerve to do it. And that was in my early 40s. But by the time I got past the average age where I was allowed to be in menopause, I just thought, yeah, I'm sick of carrying this secret and this burden. And how about like you know, once you identify a problem, you name it and you share it, and it becomes so much of a release, really just quite freeing.
Bonny, while certainly Hollywood may be notoriously ageist, it's not singularly so. And, you know, in medical school, how many hours do you think average medical school student spends learning about menopause?
1 to 4, yeah.
Yeah, it's 1 to 4. If you're at Harvard, you get 4 hours over 4 years. As Naomi said, God willing, we all live long enough to go through menopause. And on average, we could spend a decade there. And medical students, depending on where you are, maybe spend 4 hours learning about maybe 10% of our lives if we're lucky enough to live to be 100. So it is a educational, pedagogical, social, cultural, normative challenge, as well as clearly an industry one.
And if I could just add to that, thank you for saying that about Hollywood, because I am protective of my industry as much as I am at times, you know, like critical. I have, you know, but I at its heart, it is a progressive industry, and you can see the change that has happened just from this last year of films out there that are, you know, driven by females of a certain age, and that is to do with the fact that, you know, they're keeping up with the times. They are reflecting what's going on in the world right now.
Kara, you actually talked recently about selling into healthcare is hard, specifically selling into women's healthcare, and you also have the additional red tape of FDA approval, but you recently secured 10 million, a total of 20 million. So I feel like everyone here wants to know your secret in terms.
I know. Yeah. So I mean, selling into healthcare is definitely hard. I think for us, we actually have some benefits. So we are a grade A preventive screening, and in the US, we cover grade A preventive screenings at no cost sharing to the patient. So we have a pathway to get this covered for women, and that's really important to us. Like, we don't view this as something that only someone should have to pay out of pocket for. This is a cancer screening. It needs to be available to everybody. So we're lucky in that way. But I do think part of the challenge when we think about health, like fundraising in general, but I think fundraising in healthcare is a lot of our, like the founders, we're really passionate, right? And we want to solve a problem whether or not there's money to be made, like there is a problem. But investors, like their job is to make money, right? And so their questions are a lot around, can you make money? And in healthcare, the challenge is there are some barriers for a lot of other people to make money. And so when you think about like, what's the advice I can give people? It's like, yes, of course, be passionate and like love what you do, because the days are long, right? And there's like the journey is ups and downs, and days like this are wild ups, right? To sit on this stage with these women is incredible. But at the end of the day, like you're passionate, but it's a business. And when investors want to talk to you, they want to make sure you understand the business, you understand the channels, you understand what's up ahead of you and how big is that market size. And when it comes to women, just some like women challenges we have, like women tend to be really realistic, right? So I used to also be an investor. And when I would give advice to founders, I was like, hey, look, we're already going to cut your market size. Like every guy's coming in here telling me it's a $20 billion market. Like I'm dividing in half, a quarter, whatever. The women are coming in being like, well, I mean, I can get this much and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, actually, you probably are going to get that much and more, but like, we're going to divide it. It's in our nature to divide what you just told me. So go big, right? Shoot for the moon. But also have the business model behind it to understand like what other questions you're going to get and be able to answer them, right? It is a business at the end of the day if you're going to get venture dollars.
I was going to say, you also talked about how that go-to-market strategy had to be super intentional this time around. How did you kind of frame that around, again, the FDA regulations, the fact that right now you're still seeking approval, correct?
Yeah, so we're currently under review. There were a few things that were really helpful for us in particular, and hopefully will be helpful in terms of being in the market soon, which is that we received something called the FDA Breakthrough Device Designation. So we did a 16-site nationwide trial. The results we will share in a week or two here, but at the midway point, we looked at the results and we submitted to the FDA for something called the Breakthrough Device Designation. And based on the strength of those results and the importance of what we're doing to public health, they gave us the breakthrough device, which puts us on a fast track through the FDA. So when we send it to the FDA is immediately on the phone with us, asking us, moving things forward. So we've been really fortunate that the FDA also thinks this is incredibly important. Like to have that alignment is awesome. And so that helped with the fundraise for sure, right? To be able to point to the breakthrough and say, hey, we're on track, to be able to point to our results and say, you know, this is all looking the way we want. And importantly, to point to the women's results, right? So one of the things for us, and I think when people ask me, like, why hasn't this happened before? There's kind of a couple reasons. But a main reason is everyone was focused on the underscreened, right? So it was like, hey, this is, 20% of people are behind. Really, it's closer to 30%. So that market in and of itself is a big market. But they forgot to ask women, do you like the current method, right? Like it turns out that market size is everybody, right? And so when we did our clinical trial, we mapped super closely to the census data. We wanted to make sure we represented everybody. And you know what? When you ask everyone, 94% of women prefer teal to the standard of care. That's a big number, right? And 97% so it's easier, very easy to use, right? So it takes less than 2 minutes. So we were able to both de-risk the FDA, but also show the demand in the market and the need for something like this, right? Like this isn't just about underscreened, it's about getting access to healthcare. And I think sometimes when we talk about things like access, we think it's a different person's issue. It's time, right? Like I'm a mother, I have 2 kids. Like I don't have time to go to the doctor for me. I mean, embarrassing. Oh, I won't even say this because you're gonna be worried that you're gonna get the flu. You're not gonna get the flu because I haven't seen my kid in about a week. But my kid has the flu right now. And I'm like, oh my God, thank God I'm not there because I didn't get the flu shot. What? Because I've been like running around doing this and putting their visits first. And so it's really about just understanding that women want to be healthy. We just have to have better ways to stay healthy. So
Get the pediatrician to give you the flu shot.
I know, I'll ask next time. Oh, you know, I should. My husband took him there.
I feel like Chelsea needs her mic back.
I definitely will be haranguing with love you to get your flu shot later this year. Okay.
I'll do it while I'm here.
I wanted to kind of go back to this concept of shifting the narrative, right? There are a lot of squeamish conversations around the particular brand and products we're talking about here, right? What were the barriers to entry? And I wanted to talk about exactly how you guys were able to overcome them to really be able to see success.
I think the question is mainly for the two of them, but I'll jump in because I was thinking earlier today about when I was breastfeeding my first child, sort of been 10 years ago, and how often I would say, like coming to the end of a meeting, like, oh, you know, I really need to end on time because I have to go and pump. And like the physical recoil, you're like, oh, you didn't have to tell me that. I'm like, well, I did, just like I would tell you if I have to go to my next meeting. Like, this is my next appointment. It's with my Medela pump. It's going to have the sound. And thankfully, I'm going to produce some milk that I'm going to take home and freeze for when I need it later. And just as Naomi was saying, like she's seen a real shift. I saw even, 5 years ago when I was breastfeeding my youngest, maybe not like, oh, tell me more, but at least like an understanding that this shouldn't be in the shadows, that there was no kind of stigma or ick factor around like working hard and making time for being able to feed my child in the way that I had hoped and planned and wanted to do. So I do think that we've seen a shift, and also, less than 2% of venture dollars flow to women, like the two on my left. Less than 15% of all venture dollars in health flow to anything that can be kind of conceptualized honestly as women's health. And so while I think the conversation and the culture has started to move, the dollars yet have not commensurately begun to flow.
Do you want to add?
I didn't fully hear the question.
The question was like, what has changed and how do you...
Well, yeah, I mean, I think a lot about what you were saying about making the conversation normal. And I feel like there's a lot of conversations here at South by Southwest about media and marketing and how we talk about it. And it's like, that's how you've always marketed to us, but women are more than happy to talk about it. Like when you said, like, once I opened it up and shared with people, I'm sure people were like, oh my God, thank you. And I talk, and like all your friends are talking about this. So it's more like media and marketing needs to catch up with how we talk, right? Like we're not afraid of saying it. Like I remember those ads that were like, let's lose blue for periods. And you're like, we know what a period is. Like, who are you? Like, I'm not even sure that tampon's going to work because that's blue, right? So it's like, just talk to us. We talk to each other. We're living it. Like, so I just think like, it's just more about catching up. We're already there. It's just the rest of them need to come and meet us because we're there.
Yeah, I think for Stripes, it was always, yes, how far do we go with this? At first, I really thought I've got to address these skin symptoms and dry hair, and then I was definitely nervous about our vaginal skews. How much can I go there? How much can I talk about it as an actor in the industry that I'm in? But you can't do it in half measures. You just have to own it. And like Chelsea was just saying with the breastfeeding thing, I remember being in a meeting, holding my baby, and the director going, freezing up. And I was just like, what's wrong? And he said, I've just never seen that before. And I said, yes,
Baby.
no, a baby on my breast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, but I'm like,
brought in because I was doing every 2 hours at that point. So we've just got to bring people along, and then they know how to behave. Most of the time they're okay with it. And in fact, I have a very personal story, which I won't go into too much, but it's in the book, and which is called Dare I Say It? And I did dare. But with my husband, when I was getting ready to go get into, get down to business. And I was wearing a patch, a hormonal patch, and I didn't know what to do. I had to excuse myself and was very, very nervous. But the response that I got once I told the truth and owned it, even with the, you know, fear that I had, was so compassionate and beautiful and, you know, connective. It was real intimacy that sort of became the pathway for me to create this brand, for me to write the book, for me to share my story. And so, I mean, literally, he said, "How can I help? This is great. You're getting treatment. This is science. We're both the same age. Let's do this," you know. And that gave me the confidence to just keep going. And yeah, so.
I wanted to touch a little bit about, and we only have a few minutes, so, but I wanted to get a little bit of perspective. We have a very different administration right now. What do you see as the implications for women's health, given the current climate? We're in a post-Roe v. Wade world. We're talking about threats to Medicare and Medicaid. And of course, we know that usually women are the most vulnerable. So if you could give us your insight regarding, like, what are your fears of the implications?
Well, Bonnie. Well, we're here in Texas with SB 8 being the law of the state. And we know that at least 3 women have died because they didn't receive the medically necessary abortion care that they needed. I also think it's important to acknowledge that not that long ago, like 12 years ago, part of the Republican Party national platform was abortion bans, but with exceptions for rape, incest, the life of the mother, and the health of the mother. Like, we are in a radically different place now than we were, you know, not that long ago. Sepsis rates have increased 50% in pregnant people here in Texas. We don't have a clear picture of maternal mortality here in Texas because the state commission on maternal mortality has said they're not going to evaluate 2022 and 2023. They're just going to skip from 2021 to 2024. We know, though, based on national data, that maternal mortality has increased in states with the draconian abortion bans, including here in Texas. And we know that infant mortality has increased. Now, Texas has expanded Medicaid to 12 months postpartum. Rather ignominiously, my original home state of Arkansas has not. It's one of only 4 states that hasn't. Arkansas has, though, as many other states have, expanded Medicaid to include doula coverage for pregnant women. And so we have a kind of uneven picture of where kind of different states have moved or purposefully not moved to help protect pregnant women and women's health more broadly. While the Republicans in Congress have said they're not going to cut Medicaid, anyone who knows anything about budgetary math knows that you're not going to cut $1 trillion out of the federal budget if you don't cut Medicaid, Medicare, or the Department of Defense, or some combination there. And it would be catastrophic for women's health if Medicare or Medicaid were cut. It's also already had a deeply deleterious effect on kind of the production of new knowledge with the funding freezes out of the NIH and the CDC. As one example, you know, a massive grant was paused that was looking at the differential rates of Alzheimer's in women versus men. Women present with different symptoms. Treatments probably work in different ways. This should not be a political question. Like, I want any Republican who has Alzheimer's to also receive great care. I would say, too, I find it morally indefensible for the people in my party who say, well, oh, like, people have to suffer to find out. No, like, I don't want Republicans or Democrats, independents, or people who didn't vote and have never voted to be kicked off Medicaid. No, like, that is not the America that I want. So I am very concerned, though, because of kind of where I worry the budget is headed, because of the funding freezes on research. I would like for those of you who are investors here to be worried about this. Like, if the NIH is not investing in basic and applied science research, like, what are you going to invest in if you're the biotech world in 5 or 10 years? Like, the government is the risk capital. Like, that is partly what has facilitated the United States to be the leader of the scientific and the industrial world. So I'm very worried about here and now and the future. But also, I'm incredibly optimistic because I think it's a more moral place to be. And we have outlets and institutions like Inc. and South by Southwest, platforming conversations like this. We have extraordinary women, like the two to my left, who are throwing their hearts and their souls and their networks and their optimism into making lives and health and well-being better for women at different stages of life. So I think we have to try to stop the really bad things from happening. And I think there really should be bipartisan consensus to do that. And we got to really continue to invest and support extraordinary women like this to be able to do things that have never been done before, so that we never have to have another speculum experience, that we are able to age with dignity and joy, and that ultimately we make our daughters and our sons proud.
I know. On that note, I think I am way over time, but I wanted to thank you all three for joining us for this important conversation. And thank you for shedding all of this information. Thank you, everyone, for joining us at Inc. Founders House.
Thank you for having me.
Inc. Founders House welcomes entrepreneurs, investors, creators, and business leaders for our Digital Innovators Meetup with Fonz Terrell of Spill happening now outside by the stage.